Good afternoon. Thank you all for joining us today. My name is Tracy Sabetta with the National Wildlife Federation. I'm a member of the Ohio Equity Team. The Equity Team is a committee of the Ohio Energy Table, funded in part by the REAMP Energy Network. Our monthly speaker series, Equity as it Relates to Environmental Justice and Climate Resiliency, is designed to encourage members of Ohio's BIPOC communities to be more engaged with issues of health, the environment, and to ensure community voices are heard by our decision makers. On behalf of the Equity Team, we appreciate you giving us your time to be here today. I have been looking forward to today's conversation, as I'm sure you all have been as well. It is an issue near and dear to my heart, as is the speaker. And with that, I'm going to hand it over now to Alicia Smith, a member of our Equity Team, for introductions and to kick off our conversation.
Welcome again, everyone, and thank you, Tracy. It is my esteemed pleasure and honor to introduce to you all Ms. Crystal M.C. Davis. She is a respected professional who has started her career, and it bloomed and blossomed from Ohio, Columbus, Ohio, to Washington, D.C. She is currently at the Alliance for the Great Lakes as the Vice President, and we affectionately call her the VP. And she has done so much for so many in policy and strategy engagement, leading that organization. Her efforts are related to Lake Erie, drinking water policy, advocacy, and relationship building across the region. To return to Greater Cleveland, Crystal left a position in D.C. as the Federal Relations Director of Kent State University, where she established Kent State University's federal office and policy agenda at Capitol Hill. Her previous experience includes stints with the Ohio State of Representatives, the Ohio Legislative Black Caucus, and Ohio Department of Natural Resources. Crystal is a graduate of Kent State, a member of Delta Sigma Theta Sorority Incorporated, an Ohio Lake Erie Commissioner, Environmental Commissioner, and member of the JEDI Committee for the City of Twinsburg, Ohio, and the Cranes Cleveland 2018 Business 40 Under 40 honoree. I just want us to understand who we have with us today. And the 2021 Great Lakes Protection Fund Trailblazing honoree. She is an Akron, Ohio native and now lives in Northeast Ohio with her husband and wonderful children, two amazing, beautiful children. And I just want to say, in addition to all of those accolades, Crystal holds her family in high esteem and adds to the community with the value of the mother wit that she has, the honor of being a woman of color and honoring the space of community and leading us all by example. So Crystal Davis, we want to say thank you to you in advance for all that you offer to us. And we welcome you today. And we thank you already for what you're going to give. Everyone, please welcome Ms. Crystal Davis.
Listen, if I ever need to hire somebody to introduce me, it's gonna be Alicia Smith every time, because I think she's taken notes from Monica Lewis Patrick, which also provides lots of fanfare for every introduction, but I'm loving it. I'm feeling it. I need that today, given that I was at the Healing Our Waters conference with Alicia just yesterday in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, and flight landed about 1:00 a.m. here in Cleveland. So, you know, I think we just gonna keep doing it. Got my hustle juice. It's super excited and humbled to be here in community with all of you today, and especially to be introduced by my dear friend, mentor, and colleague, Alicia Smith. Thank you for your leadership. And thank you for the invitation from Tracy, Chad, and Jocelyn, who have worked tirelessly on the environmental front. So I'm super excited to be with family today to talk about these things. So what I'll do is I have a PowerPoint. I'm gonna go ahead and share my screen. And we welcome you to throw questions in the chat as we go along. So again, my name is Crystal M.C. Davis with the Alliance for the Great Lakes. I always add the MC because there happens to be two Black women named Crystal Davis working on water issues in Cleveland. And so we get each other's emails all the time, but the other one is at the sewer district. So I'm Crystal M.C. Davis. I'm with the Alliance for the Great Lakes. We're a regional nonprofit organization based in Chicago with 6 offices throughout the Great Lakes states. We primarily focus on policy issues. We have a host of other things we do. We have stewardship programs. Most notably is our Adopt a Beach program, where we assemble teams of volunteers that go out and clean up the beaches. What's unique about that is that we chart what we find, and that helps to guide social awareness campaigns as we share that information with researchers. Our policy work falls into three big buckets: the work to combat aquatic invasive species, agriculture and water work, mostly trying to curb agricultural pollution on the western basin of Lake Erie and the lower Fox River, and some work in Michigan as well. And then our newest body of work is our drinking water work, which includes water affordability, water assistance, lead service line replacement, and addressing aging water infrastructure. I say that's our newest body of work because when I came to the organization, we were working diligently on aquatic invasive species and ag and water, and a lot of planning work at the local level as well. The drinking water work came as a result of conversations we had throughout Northeast Ohio with communities of color. They said, listen, I hear all that you're talking about in terms of the lakes, but affordability is a major concern. Access is a major concern. Water quality is a major concern. And that's our connection to the lakes. And so we listened to community and then embedded that into our suite of priorities. I have to give context for this conversation. I've given a lot of presentations in recent years, and this is so appropriate as I'm just getting back from Milwaukee, where I spent every summer, and my grandmother lived in Milwaukee, but this is my great grandfather, Joe Porter Harris. And so often as people of color in this environmental movement, it's not a lot of us. We don't see a lot of faces that look like ours. We go to conferences and we're like chocolate sprinkles on vanilla ice cream, just trying to catch up with one another. But there have been conversations where you feel like maybe this is not something that is natural to our community. I felt like, I can only speak for myself. And my grandmother passed away in 2019, God rest her soul. And I received and inherited a bag of papers. And as I opened up that bag, I saw that there was lots of paperwork from the USDA, the Farm Defense Program. Come to find out that my family owned tens and tens and tens of acres of farmland. And still do in Starkville, Mississippi. And my grandmother ran that farm. Now, my grandfather is here pictured because my great-grandmother did not take pictures. But my great-grandfather was a businessman that traveled. And my great-grandmother stayed and had all of her sons work this farm. And so it was so funny. I was sitting in a meeting, and I keep mentioning this because it stands at the forefront of my mind. I was in a meeting last year, and we were talking about trying to bring more voices to tables. And there was a colleague that said, you know, we do need to value diversity, but more than diversity, we have to get some content expertise to the table. And I had to remind her in that moment that they are not mutually exclusive. We can be both diverse and be experts in our very own right. And so I had to challenge her to show me her paperwork because she does not possess a legacy of leadership in agriculture like my family has. And so I think I say this, and I bring this up particularly in this presentation to say that we are not new to this. We are true to this. This is from whence I've come. And I have to remind myself, and I have these papers on my desk to remind me that this is who I am and where we've come from, and we are the original agriculturalists. And so sometimes you have to remind yourself and affirm yourself, as my daughter told me, as I was having her do her affirmations in the mirror, my 7-year-old daughter, she's like, well, what do you tell yourself? And I'm like, oh, good question. But this is the reminder that this is something that has been a legacy of our communities of color and is germane to who we are for some time now. This is not new, even though the terms environmental justice and equity and inclusion and diversity are all the buzz these days. Social, racial, and economic justice are inseparable from environmental justice. We cannot achieve our vision of a Great Lakes enjoyed by all when systemic racism is allowed to permeate our society unchecked. I don't do a presentation where I don't bring this up, because of its core relevance to every issue. If you care about environmental justice, then you should care about social, racial, and economic justice because they are interconnected. And so we have to fight all of these fights together. And I think that's really, really important. In June of 2020, everybody had a statement. What made me super proud is that this was something that we as an organization believed in prior to June 2020 and have been looking to try to address these issues since before then. So you have to meet communities at their connection to these issues. So these are my babies that have grown up a couple years since this. But, during those community conversations, often we have a tendency to make assumptions about what communities care about. I say all the time, people said, we have to, if we're going to talk about these issues, we really need to dumb it down so people understand. And I'm like, no, you really don't. You just need to talk in a language that people understand. In Toledo, the babies know what cyanobacteria is because they had to. They were there in the midst of the Toledo water crisis. So they know these terms. You can speak at the level that they understand. And what I found in Cleveland and in Lorain was that people were like, yes, I care about the lakes. That's great. But I'm most connected to this issue by that tap that's in my kitchen. So let's start there and how that hits my pocketbook. And the lead pipes that are in my home. That's what I care about a little bit more than that, the threat of an algae bloom on the western basin of Lake Erie as I sit in Cleveland. And so what we've had to do is tailor our strategies to fit the populations that we are seeking to enter into community with. But we've also learned that one size does not fit all. And so we cannot have these strategies where, this is what we do. Across the globe. That is not going to be locally relevant. And so we've tailored our strategies because we work in all of the Midwest states, that the way we do community building and partnerships in Chicago looks different than how we're working in Cleveland based on the relationships and the needs of that particular community. So water infrastructure, it's all the buzz. It's the word that's coming up a lot is water infrastructure because there is a historic investment in this aging historic issue. And so right now across the Great Lakes, we have an $180 billion need for water infrastructure over the next 25 years. And so the price tag is high. There's new federal funding for water infrastructure through a number of pieces of legislation, and we are super grateful about that. But it's important to note that this is going to be a down payment, a significant down payment, but a down payment on a big bill. And so we are not going to completely eradicate all of our issues with this down payment, but we're hoping that if the funds are distributed equitably to the people that need them the most first, then we can make some progress on the issues that we're seeing. So most of the $50 billion for water infrastructure is being allocated through the Clean Water and Drinking Water State Revolving Funds. It's important to note that this is the main gateway for federal funds to address water infrastructure issues at the local level. So we need to make sure that we are not letting opportunities like weighing in on how the state revolving funds are distributed fly by us. And so again, we've talked a little bit about what the SRFs are. You'll hear that term, and a lot of us that work in water, we hear these terms every day, but it's a federal low interest loan programs administered by the state. And then this is the primary channel for federal funds to address the issues that we care about. So we have a staffer, and I never take credit for this because I think we have to give credit where credit is due. Annalisa Castle at the Alliance for the Great Lakes, our Clean Water and Equity Policy Director, came to us and said, hey guys, we have to get on top of this SRF situation. And we need to bring lots of partners together to talk with a unified voice about what we like to see. Every state has their intended use plans. How do they intend to distribute these funds to different communities throughout the state? And it's imperative that we have conversations with the SRF administrators about how this money is going to get distributed. And so we've partnered with PolicyLink, River Network, EPIC, the Environmental Policy and Innovation Center, and over 30 organizations to put together a national SRF Advocates Forum. It's a national coalition where we are supporting and collaborating and catalyzing action. We have monthly meetings, educational tools, advocacy tools, and we're building the capacity to do deep relationship building. This is the forum where we invite in SRF administrators to say, okay, what do you need from us? We understand the constraints that you're under as a state agency. How can we better inform the intended use plans? What partnerships need to happen so that technical assistance is extended to the areas that need it most? And so we're super excited about this forum. We're now in the stage where we've commented on most of the intended use plans in the Midwest. And now we're going to start talking about doing regional hubs for different states and getting smaller groups together so that they can talk about where there are opportunities to grow the partnerships. And this is a brief list at the some of the participating organizations. Again, a robust and diverse list of partners, frontline partners, big greens, if you will, lots of organizations coming together to say we want to make this happen and we want to make sure that we're seizing the opportunity before us. And so often we talk about, what we want from local elected officials. Again, my background is in government relations. I've been in government relations my entire career. And so starting at the Ohio State House. And so it's easy for me to say, okay, what do we want from these legislators? But I like to challenge myself and our organization to say, what are we willing to commit to first? We want to advocate for increased funding at all levels of government. I know we just got a historic investment, but we know, again, more money is needed. And so when I talk to state legislators, I tell them that I'm making the same ask of local and federal legislators as well. And so we need more money to address these issues because water is a unifier. And so this is one of the issues that affects every constituency. And so this is what we need to make sure we're focusing on. We need multi-sector coalition building. And so I'm appreciative of the opportunity to speak with partners with the energy table, because we need to have energy advocates that understand the connection between water and energy. We need educational advocates. We need the business sector, and every sector, the healthcare sector, especially, and understanding, if nothing else, if the pandemic hasn't taught us anything, we've really underscored the intrinsic connection between water and public health. When the CDC's first line of defense against the pandemic, the virus, was to wash your hands, it became glaringly apparent that there were a lot of households that did not have water. And so this is an area of synergy where the health community and environmental advocates can partner together. So we need these multi-sector coalitions that can then go into legislatures and talk with a unified voice on these issues. We need to educate key stakeholders, making sure that everybody understands their role and their connection to these issues. And we need to amplify community voice. I say that because that does not mean that we are speaking on behalf of community. That means that we are passing them the mic for them to speak for themselves. And Kim Foreman with Environmental Health Watch, I always quote her because she says that authentic community engagement starts at the ideation stage and goes all the way through to the implementation stage. It's not going to be sufficient to then ask community folks who you have not engaged throughout the entire process to look over something that you've created already at the end and say, well, is that good? That is not authentic community engagement. It's bringing people in at the beginning when you first have an idea, when you first have an inkling that you want to do something. And so that's what we need to do. We need to make sure, I just had a conversation with the Great Lakes Funders Collaborative, and I reminded them, everybody has a role in this, even philanthropy. We have access to tables that some of our partners don't. And that's not me personally or certain organizations, but wherever you have an opportunity to kick in the door and make a seat at the table, you should do that. And make sure that you're bringing others with you. The call to action. I think it's really important that we make sure that we understand what we can do. So we want to share and adopt best practices on healthy water infrastructure implementation. I think that goes under the radar. I know we've seen 1 million webinars over the last couple of years during the pandemic. We have Zoom fatigue, but at the end of the day, we're not doing enough sharing on what's worked, what's been successful, what was a disaster. I know it's embarrassing, but we have to be able to be transparent with one another to talk about what's not working so that other communities that are similar don't have to reinvent the wheel. We want to get support for full lead service line replacement with timelines and delivery plans. I say that because we're so caught up in the joy of like having this historic investment, having an EPA that is fired up about these issues, and I'm excited too. But it's our job to hold them accountable. Yes, our state says that this is a priority. What is the timeline? What is the delivery plan? What is the strategy? It's not just the what, it's the how. How do you intend to get this done? How do we intend to prioritize communities that have historically been disenfranchised over time? And so that is one of the areas of opportunity that we need to hold our elected officials accountable for. We want to increase investment in resources. Again, that doesn't just mean funds. That means making sure that technical assistance is available. I'm having great conversations with the state of Ohio right now through the SRF Advocates Forum about how we can partner with community groups to have statewide educational technical assistance programming so that everybody who's interested in this issue has an opportunity to interface and learn more about how they can get involved in these conversations. And they're not closed door conversations, because that happens often as well. And then workforce development and equitable public engagement. I say workforce development because it's the underlying thread that often goes under the radar. If we invest all of the money that is necessary to address our aging water infrastructure, then we know that that is going to create a lot of jobs. Who gets those jobs? How are those jobs divvied up? And that needs to be a growing conversation to make sure that we are actually having a system of hiring people from those very communities. And then equitably engaging people. Again, I say it almost every presentation too. Our board chair, Joel Mogerman, said, you know, we have this notion of like, bring all these people to the table without the acknowledgement that perhaps that table was never created for all of us anyway. And we need to break the table and create a new one that really fits, is designed to embrace and be inclusive of everybody that deserves to be there, which is everyone. And so we have to get into a spirit of breaking these tables, fearlessly creating new norms and getting everybody involved in these processes. And so that is the primary presentation. This is my contact information. I'd love to connect with any of you, and I'd love to have a discussion about these issues a little bit further.
Wonderful. Wow. Wow, wow, wow. Thank you so much, Crystal. When you start to talk about some main things that came out, diversity, convenings. So we're having a diverse public discourse about people, power, and policy. When you're thinking about people, power, and policy, Crystal, kind of go into depth. What does that mean? And break down each portion of that. Because we know that though we could break that table, how do we bring the people to the table and honor their voices? And you've done that with a lot of policy. So I won't answer the question while asking it, but please.
You know you can answer this question, right?
No, you've taught very well, please.
Oh, no, I think, you know, I think part of the question is even wrong, because it's not about bringing people to the table, it's bringing the table to them. And so at some point we have to, again, create new norms where we are breaking out of our own silos. I mean, in this pandemic, we had to get creative. I was always a remote worker. Okay, so my headquarters is in Chicago, and we had all of these conference calls. And so it's funny now that all of a sudden they're like, oh my God, we're all at home. We all need to get on the Zoom. I was like, we had meaningful conversations pre-pandemic over the phone. Why do we have to look at each other every day now? And so, and so we thought creatively. I have conversations with my staff. We have Monday check-in meetings. We don't sit in front of the computer. I have a colleague that walks her dog. I have a colleague that is making lunches, and I'm walking the neighborhood, and we're having conversations. So we have to think creatively about how we meet the needs of the people that we want to engage with. Again, that also means that if you want to go to, you want to forge a connection with a aging population, perhaps you need to set up a conversation in a senior center and get the community room and do a webinar there and answer questions there. Perhaps we have watch parties where we do a webinar and we get teams of people together throughout the state or the region to watch this together and answer questions and create dialogue. Perhaps it's not just going to churches and engaging the faith population, but also going to community events. And so I think we just have to really challenge ourselves about that. We understand that people possess the power to inspire policy change. So that's the people power policy. It's sometimes it's going to be financial. I'm gonna be 100% real with you. I've been a lobbyist my entire career, and so deep pockets can change the game in the legislature. It just is what it is. It's facts. But when you don't have those deep pockets, you can get teams of people together that have voting power. Can actually influence policy change, but they're going to have to require it. They're going to have to hold legislators accountable. They're going to have to fearlessly continue to have constant communication with our elected officials to let them know what our priorities are. Consistent messaging that is very clear. And so that's why we're trying to build these multi-sector coalitions that can say, yeah, I work in business and I care about water. I work in health and I care about water. I work in education and I care about water. So that's part of that.
Well, I love that. That leads to the question that is in the chat from one of our esteemed attendees. What are some ways to meaningful involvement of citizens from the beginning of the process instead of after the work is done?
Yeah, we wrote a report that said the title of the report in about 2017, 2018 was Step 1, Shut Up and Listen. And I think it can't get more plain than that. And so if you want to know what community thinks, you want to see if they really care about an issue, you need to shut up and actually listen to them. And then the second thing, the report we didn't write, is to actually act on what you heard. I will say another thing is that people are tired of being told. Now that everybody has heard, like, oh, you should listen, great. Now there's a million focus group conversations and they're like, oh, I'll give you a gas card. I'll give you some crudité. And everybody laughs because I always say, we don't want your crudité. You have another meeting and have a cold cut sandwich or some carrots and ranch. Count me out. Count me out. When we did the community conversations with the Alliance, we have full dinner for people's families. We had a meeting at 6 o'clock in the evening. How do you not feed the family? How do you not have an interpreter? How do you not make sure that your meeting is on a bus line? How do you not make sure that there's childcare available, or at least something for the kids to do? And then expect to take someone away from their home at 6 o'clock in the evening because they couldn't come during the day because they have another job. And so I think we have to think deeply about how to make it easier for people to actually engage. That's how you equitably get them involved in the beginning. Be clear on what the expectations are. On the meeting saying, well, I got an idea, I really don't know, it might be a waste of your time. It's not something that will lure people to come to a meeting. Saying we have an amazing idea, we've talked to funders, and we have some money to pay for your capacity to actually sit at this table. And we're going to make sure that we can meet whatever needs you have and address any barriers you have so that you can equitably engage in this and partner with us, be a thought partner for how we execute these things, is how you equitably get somebody involved from the beginning stages.
Wonderful. So an additional question, do you see obstacles to turning federal funding into meaningful improvements coming from the state legislators in Ohio?
Oh yeah, lots of obstacles. Lots of obstacles. I mean, I say all the time, we have to build the political will to win.
Okay.
And so for so often when we talk about water infrastructure, and shout out to Melanie Houston with OEC, we work together on all things water. And often we're at the State House, and I remember a time where we were using that $180 billion figure, and people were like, that sounds so crazy that we know that whatever money we give you on this issue is going to be a drop in the bucket. And
Okay.
that is not going to help to build the political will to do something on that.
Mhm.
We're in a climate right now where legislators are term limited. And so they're constantly running for office.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
can't put on a campaign ad that, hey, we put a little bit of money towards water infrastructure and we didn't accomplish much, but I did a down payment. Like, that is not something that's going to implore voters to get excited about your candidacy. And so
Okay.
as much as we hate to be in this mode of having to think with a political mind, we do have to. And so we've had to change our strategies to say, you know what, if you gave us $1 billion towards lead service line replacement, we can help X amount of homeowners address lead service lines in their homes. And that, you know, I mean, we had to really start doing the math on all of this so that we can sell the impact that they would be creating. So in terms of barriers, we have a polarized political climate. We have legislators that, I mean, whether right or wrong, are looking for the sound bites and quick wins. And a lot of times our work is not a compilation of quick wins. It's things that's going to take a long time to accomplish. And so those are some of the major barriers I see. And then the how do we distribute these funds? We got the money. Now, if we don't have an intricate strategy of making sure that we get these funds to the communities that need them the most, who have been divested from historically over and over again, and subject to racism, redlining, and everything else.
Yes.
Yeah, if we don't do that, then we've missed the boat there.
Right. And to that point, can you address the intentionality and intersectionality of water policy, power, and people? You know, I would tell you all the stuff that you've taught all these communities, but please share.
Are you referring to like the multi-coalition piece?
The multi-coalitions, how you've taken community to the State House and advocated, how you shared the power, what does that power sharing look like? And how do you continue to have the people be an intricate part of the engagement?
Yeah, I think sometimes it's hard for people to connect the dots to see the opportunity. And so there are groups that are not environmental groups that want to be involved in these issues because they understand the connection that the environment has to everything else that they care about, but don't really see how to make that happen. And so part of what we've done is said, okay, listen, we're going to do a day at the State House. We're going to reach out to people that are working in the environment and groups that don't, to say, do you want to come? Do you want to come and listen? One of the things I'm probably most proud of is working with the youth with Junction Coalition. Yeah. I remember taking Megan Powell to D.C. for her first time and telling her about how to navigate the halls of Congress. Yes. And it's something that we take for granted. We work in this sector. We work with legislators. We interface with them daily. We walk the halls of the State House and of Congress. And there are young people that are not just the future, they are the present.
Come on. Yes.
You know, Alexis Smith reminds me all the time, y'all didn't exclusively go through the pandemic without us. Like, we went through the pandemic too. The Toledo water crisis, there were young people who are earners for their family that could not go to work. And she told me they were working at Starbucks and couldn't go to work that day. And that meant less money that was available for their household. Exactly. And so I think that we have to quit thinking of people in silos and not really thinking of them as allies and partners in this movement. And so if there are young people that are interested in these issues, get them involved. Bring them to the State House, bring them to DC, talk to funders about getting money so that they can have the capacity to participate. Because I think that's how we start to widen the tent.
Which speaks to the slide that you shared about multi-sector collaborations and power building.
Right.
I want to say to our attendees, do not be shy. I know this might be a little change from how we normally do things, but come off mute. If you don't feel like typing in the chat, just say, hold on, Alicia, I got something I want to ask Crystal. This is our conversation. These are our communities, and we stand in the gap for so many individuals who want to have an opportunity to ask the questions. This is being streamed live and recorded. So this will be an opportunity to be shared over and over again, and we don't want to lose your voice. So please feel free to come off mute and ask those questions necessary. Can you talk a little bit about what the Justice 40 component of the federal legislation means for how dollars are spent? What are the limitations or shortcomings?
You're talking about the Justice 40?
In Justice 40.
Yeah, I think that there are a lot of initiatives coming out of DC right now that are amazing. I think, quite honestly, there's been so less progress on these issues that we just excited to get the attention right now. And so we're excited that Administrator Regan at EPA has created a new Office of Environmental Justice. He's hired Dr. Jalan Newsom-White, formerly of the Kresge Foundation, who's from the Midwest, to be a senior director on environmental justice. There's the Justice 40 initiative where, a good portion of federal funds has to be spent on minority engagement and things of that nature. So I think that there are lots of positive things happening. I think and it has the potential to happen. The thing that I think I'm most afraid of is people being so excited about all of this new shiny things that's happening that they're not getting involved in how these things are actually rolled out. And so initially, when we talked about Justice 40 and getting environmental justice more prevalent at the federal level, there were lots of conversations about it. But Justice 40 didn't initially include the Great Lakes Restoration Initiative. And so that's a huge opportunity. A major federal program the major federal program that helps to address a lot of the Great Lakes issues was not included in the Justice 40 initiative. I was able to work with Alicia and a number of other partners with the Healing Our Waters Coalition to do an equity analysis of the Great Lakes Restoration Initiative. And we were able to share that with Regional Administrator Shore, and a lot of the folks in DC and across Environmental Protection Agency. And there's a lot of receptivity to integrating these things, but we have to stay tuned to how it actually gets done. Who's in the room? Who's at the table? How are folks engaged? What is the rollout strategy? What is the timeline for getting these things done? And so that is part of the thing that I feel like is an opportunity to go right or go left. And so we have to stay involved there.
And Crystal, something that I noticed with the Justice 40 and the infrastructure funds that are coming as an unprecedented investment is the workforce development, aging infrastructure, aging workforce, right?
Yeah.
And I think that many times we miss the opportunity to engage our young people, because you talked about that, bringing them the table, right? Yeah. And saying, this is how we do this. Talk about a little bit about how because you've done a lot with young people, the young, all kinds of things. Kind of talk about how do we bring our young people's voice into the room and establish spaces for them to be equitably compensated for their time, their voice, their investment.
Yeah, I think that it's really odd. We come from an era and I come from an era where we were just supposed to be excited to get an internship, and they were all unpaid, right? I don't remember paid internships other than me getting work study as a low income kid in college and getting paid work study to do an internship, but all of them were unpaid. And so we still kind of have that mindset in our head that they should be grateful for this opportunity to work for free. And that's just not realistic anymore. We're in a climate where, young people can go and work at Amazon and make $15, $20 an hour. And
Yes.
so going somewhere and spending a lot of time, and sometimes it's a fruitful opportunity that leads to a career, and other times they get there and find out that they're getting coffee for people and ordering lunch, and it wasn't as fruitful as they originally anticipated, and they wasted valuable time where they could have been really being mentored by somebody that would help them to navigate these movements.
Yeah.
And so we need to find a way to fund their participation, and not just youth and adult participation in these movements. Just sitting in a meeting, so often we talk about, oh, well, yeah, we'll have a meeting. And it's like, that was an hour and a half out of somebody's day who may not have had that kind of time. And so we definitely need to incentivize their participation. That's how you keep them involved, whether they care about it or not.
Yeah.
They may not have been able to afford to sit at that table. And sometimes we correlate that to a lack of interest in these issues.
Yeah.
I reject the notion that people of color don't care about the environment. That is not true.
What you
I
said.
know a lot of people that care a whole lot about it. They also just cannot afford to take 2 hours out of their day to sit in a meeting to pontificate around a table with some people who may or may not even provide them the opportunity to talk. And I've been in those meetings too. And so I think we have to really look ourselves in the mirror on these things.
And you talked about the poll fatigue, and many times we ask our communities, including the multi-generation communities, all of these different questions without the action or the plan of implementation, which is to the point of not just, some of our young people were able to create SQR codes to find out where water shutoffs were and those type things. And I think that was one thing that you really worked with young people. So when you talk about the Justice 40s, you're also talking about technology and technical assistance and capacity building. And can you just talk a little bit about how those things are coming together to support a heavier campaign on communications to the people?
Yeah, I think that we're learning a whole lot from young people about how they want to be, and from community about how they want to be communicated with. There are some people that I met with during our community conversations that said, listen, I'm reading my neighborhood newsletter because that's who I trust. That's who I talk to. That's my CDC. And so part of our strategy has to be to go talk to the people at that CDC so we can get in their newsletter.
Hello.
And then there are other people that want that canvassing door to door. And then there are other folks who want the real tech heavy piece. They want the QR code that they can look up just from their cell phone. They want to be able, and don't put that past people. These seniors have learned how to use these cell phones during this pandemic. When I saw my dad at a restaurant trying to get the the menu with his cell phone, I was like, okay, we're at a different point in the world here. And so I think that with technical assistance, we have to think creatively. I've been having great conversations with the state of Ohio about the total maximum daily load in the western basin of Lake Erie.
Okay.
That TMDL is a pollution diet, if you will. And so as that pollution diet is being crafted, we've been meeting with the state about how we make sure that impacted communities understand what's happening and have an opportunity to weigh in where they can. And part of that is taking the frequently asked questions and the fact sheets that tell you what's going on and make sure those are in multiple languages. And so we just had a conversation with Ohio EPA last week where they said, okay, we're getting that into motion. We're going to have these things in multiple languages. That's a win. That's a win. And so that is part of what we need to do. And we can get young people involved in these movements as well, whether it's distributing the materials, coming up with the questions, and really, again, incentivizing and paying for their participation in these things.
Wonderful. We have another question, Crystal. Will you talk a bit more about the opportunity ahead with the next Great Lakes Restoration Initiative plan?
Yes, we were again in Milwaukee yesterday, had the opportunity to hear from EPA Regional Administrator Shore from Region 5. And she talked extensively about the Action Plan 4 that's coming up with the Great Lakes Restoration Initiative. and the need to make sure that we are embedding equity into that program. And so she mentioned that there will be some listening sessions. Again, more listening sessions. When they come, we got to participate too, though. I mean, you can't be critical, but then not engage. And so we have to engage to make sure our voice is registered in these conversations. So there will be some conversations coming up where we have an opportunity to interface with the region to talk about how to embed equity into the Great Lakes Restoration Initiative and climate justice and climate resilience into the action plan for. And so that's something I'm super excited to get involved in. Again, this goes back to the equity analysis that the Healing Our Waters Coalition did for the Great Lakes Restoration Initiative, where we talked about making sure that there was lots of technical assistance. There was set aside grants available for Indigenous and BIPOC communities and low income communities, which are always not the same. So I make sure I mention both and things of that nature. We have a host of recommendations on that as well.
Wonderful. You know, I want to ask you a question that was asked to me on yesterday while we were in Milwaukee. A young man in his late 20s, the 27. I don't know how these young people see that, but he asked the question, what is the difference between climate justice and environmental justice? And he was in the audience hearing, all of the different directors speak. And he said, I just want to know, one, what is the difference and how do we get involved? So if you could just expound on that.
Environmental justice is the disproportionate impact that environmental decisions have on specific populations and communities.
Okay.
Climate justice is the same thing. And so I love that Healing Our Waters did a messaging polling report a couple of years ago and really took every term that we use, because it's semantics. They took every term we use and saw how people responded to them. And they learned that some communities were super turned off by the term environmental racism, but they were appreciating the opportunity to talk about environmental justice. And so, I mean, again, it's a situation where different populations and different communities prefer certain terms, but at the end of the day, what we're talking about is how these environmental decisions are impacting or disproportionately impacting certain communities. And so you can use whatever words you want, but at the end of the day, we need to talk about how do we create solutions that address these issues and alleviate some of the burden and historic harm that has been created to specific communities throughout the years.
Beautiful answer. I am going to share this with this young man because he's actually an artist. Yeah. And when his portion of how do we get involved was from an artistic perspective. And I know that, you've seen some of the installation arts that pay homage to green infrastructure, as well as some of the videos that have been voiced for young people in Milwaukee, young people in Toledo, Detroit. What are some other ways that you think that art and culture can come into the water sector in the policy world?
Yeah, I think that you need to use whatever your ministry is to get the messages out about these issues. And for some, it's painting, it's art, or it's painting, or it's I've seen amazing installations where they've taken plastic that they found in the lakes and created art installations with it. I've seen people do some amazing poetry to talk about water issues. I've seen people that hosted conversations. I think you use whatever medium it is that moves you, because that means that there are other people that probably would love to hear about that as well. We cannot be linear in our approach to how we address and discuss these issues. We just can't afford to at this stage in the game. If
I
we
would
want to get
totally
more
agree.
people involved, really get more people involved, then we need to speak in all of their languages. And for some it's dance, for some it's art, for some it's music, and we need to do that.
So some say policymakers listen harder to people or companies who support their campaigns. To the extent that voting makes a difference in what kinds of policies we get in Ohio, what steps do you think are likely to be most productive right now? For getting the vote out.
Yeah, no, that's a great question. Absolutely. They're listening to their donors. They absolutely are, every time. And I will never negate that. I think what we also need to recognize is that they cannot ignore people power and the voting power. And so when I seek to get a legislator involved in an issue, I also find some of their constituents that I know have the responsibility to vote for them or could vote for them or against them to be involved in these conversations as well and let them know their zip code when they go in to meet with them too. And so I think that's super important. As a former legislative aide, I will say people meeting with their legislator matters. And so that's part of it. I think that we are looking at some amazing opportunities. We have a new session that starts in January in Ohio. We are looking to introduce legislation on lead service line replacement and trying to expedite that process here in Ohio and make grant funds available for private homeowners to address the lead service lines in their homes. We want to work within the confines of the state budget to get more money allocated to addressing the intersection of these issues. We want to address water affordability. That's an issue that we've worked on for a while now, making sure that we have stopping water shutoffs in Ohio. I know that it's a controversial thing, but and I don't know that, you know, we're going to get a legislature that's super excited about that, but we still need to have the conversation about stopping residential water shutoffs, making emergency water assistance available to families that need it, and addressing debt. If you've paid your bill for 2 years consistently, we should get some debt forgiveness. And so those are some of the things that we're looking to champion in the legislature next year. To get out the vote, we're going to have to start talking about the stuff that people care about and talk about their, and I say it all the time. I met with legislators and they tell me, oh, I appreciate that you work on water, but that's not really my thing. I care about kids. That's what this one legislator told me. And I was like, wow, you know that kids need water too. And then I had to go into a conversation of talking about how my priority and his priority were aligned. And so I think that's the process we need to go through, is really talking about all of our legislators' priorities, their personal priorities, and then how the environment shows up in those spaces and how it interfaces and connects to a lot of the things that they care about.
Well, thank you so much. I see that Chad has a question, but I'm going to let Chad ask his question as he closes us out, because I think it's going to be something that we can talk about for decades in regards to STEM or STEAM. But for you, Crystal, I want to say to you, thank you for your leadership. Thank you for allowing your voice to be a platform for many of us. And we greatly appreciate your time, VP. And we ask that you continue to be fierce in your work and know that we support you. Chad?
Thank you so very much. Again, it is always an honor to be in Crystal's presence. When she gets to drop some knowledge, I'm feverishly taking notes. So thank you again for being with us. Alicia, you're awesome as always, and I am always taking notes when I'm in your presence as well. Some of the great, I like to say I'm among giants when I get to be around some of these great women within this industry. So, but with that being said, I did ask the question of STEM or STEAM because, and you already answered it, so I'm not going to belabor the point any further. But it is something that I really hope that we can get away from just the STEM, but actually make this theme. As you see behind me in my picture here is a wonderful upright bass. If it wasn't for my art form, I wouldn't be able to handle any of the challenges that I currently face within the environmental landscape. And it's because of my understanding of my art through this artistry that I'm able to do so many creative things and to express my creativity in a multitude of ways that are now more beneficial to others. But I also want to say thank you to everybody that has come and has asked questions, that have participated with us so far. In the chat, I've already placed in there an opportunity for you to fill out a survey. We need to hear from you, and we need to get direction from you of what you would like to hear next, who's the next speakers, and so we can really plan out 2023's programming. And this, we can't really move forward without you, because you are the audience that helps create the atmosphere of which all of this happens. So thank you again. Thank you to the Rehab Network. Thank you to Tracy for being able to put everything together like you always do for us, and Ivanka for being able to be such a stalwart within the organization. You all are so fantastic. Thank you so very much. And again, thank you, Crystal, for gracing us with your presence and your knowledge. And I would just like to do a quick shameless plug since I got 3 minutes. We are, the Ohio Sierra Club is doing a clean transportation dialogue about reimagining transportation. It's a statewide event, but it's being held in person in Columbus, November 5th at 10 a.m. We will be serving food. We will not be having any crudité for folks, but we definitely will have a meal set out. And we need to know that you're coming so we can have enough food, because we don't want anybody to go away hungry. As much as I have great faith, I am not the one to be able to break some fish and some loaves and have multitude of baskets laying about. So I'm going to ask if you can tell us and let us know in advance that you'll be there. The link is in the chat, bit.ly, the bit.ly/Ohio -TPT. If that's not confusing enough for you, just go to the Ohio Sierra Club Facebook page or Instagram or any of our social media things, and we'll have it there. But we look forward to seeing you next month. Third Thursday, which is the 17th, November 17th. Something happened great in 1911 on that day, but neither here nor there being said. Just would like to let you know that this November 17th, 2022, we will be having another speaker, and I can't wait to break the news of who that's going to be to you shortly. So until then, we look forward to having you join us then. Thank you, thank you, thank you all. Have a good day.